Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Black Tower Podcast, a Wheel of Time podcast. I am Andrew.
And I'm Aaron.
And we have two absolutely amazing guests with us today. And I'm sure you will recognize them as soon as you hear their voice. So, do you lovely people want to introduce yourselves?
Michael Kramer.
Kate Redding.
Oh, you see, they did a much better job of it than we would have.
It's the voice, man.
Just a little background, and stop me and correct me if I get any of this wrong. I just have pulled internet research, but Michael Kramer and Kate Redding have been recording audiobooks together and separately for over 30 years.
Just under 30 for me.
Just under 30 for you. So you didn't start at the same time.
No.
And it looks like Michael has about 250 plus titles available, and Kate has over 400, which is just staggering to me. That it's like, if anybody had written that many books, they would be just ridiculous. But to have read aloud that many books and recorded them, to me is mind-blowing.
I think that doesn't include the books that we have recorded for the Library of Congress Talking Books for the Blind program.
Right, and I'm not sure that also includes the books that are the rights have actually run out and they've been reissued under with different narrators, because there are a number of titles that I did originally that are no longer available, that have been re-recorded by some other people since then, because the rights have expired and been purchased by someone else.
So they're all swirling around in the. I recorded The Valley of the Dolls on cassette.
Yeah.
You can't find that anywhere.
Yeah.
Which may be a good thing.
Well, maybe.
I bet you somebody will find it somewhere. Somebody has it.
Yeah.
Never underestimate the internet.
But you live in Washington, D.C., or the D.C. area, and sometimes you work together, and most of the time you work individually or by yourselves, and you record out of your home, I take it. And from what we know, I'm hoping to get to know you guys a little better and what you've done a little more. But what we know and recognize is that you have worked together on the Wheel of Time series, and apparently anything that Brandon Sanderson has ever written.
Not quite all of it. He's branched out into some different things. And for instance, what was it? I think I did one. Was it Elantris? I did one for the Talking Books program that commercially was done by a different narrator. But yeah, we have the Stormlight Archive. I've got the Rhythmatist series and the Mistborn series going with Brandon.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and then I think he's now got a couple of other series out there as well. That he's the Steelheart, I think, and Skyfall.
Some of which are not related to each other in that shared universe that he's built. But as far as we're a Wheel of Time podcast, and we do, I know Andrew does, and myself, we consider you to be kind of the unofficial voice or the voices of the Wheel of Time. And I've heard the audiobook so much and read them that even when I'm reading things, I hear your voices.
That's wild.
Yeah. Well, there's like over 400 hours. So if you listen to the whole series, that's a lot of our voice. That's a lot of time to spend with us.
With some of the younger fans, I actually get worried that they have spent more time listening to our voices than to their own parents.
Yeah, that's a real concern. Is there anything that you guys would like to add to help introduce yourselves or I know, talking about yourself is not always fun. But before we get into asking questions, we're not really going to jump into anything that's diving into the wheel of time, as we promised you that we would not. So this is more a general interview, and we really would like to get to know more about the two of you and what you do.
I think our backgrounds are interesting in that we come from a theater background, which is can be transformative and focused on character. And I think that's one of the things that people tend to like about our recordings, is that the character voices are distinct. And it's been an amazing journey for us to have this thing that we do, which kind of began as a side gig. It was a good alternative to waiting tables, turn into this career which feeds off of and nourishes our other love, which is theater.
Yeah, I think, when we started, we were recording on reel-to-reel, and if you wanted to listen to it, you had to listen to it on cassette. So the technology has changed so much in terms of how quickly the product can get into people's hands, how easily it is. It used to be that, you get a catalog, you pour over the catalog, you call in or you send in your request. That takes about if you mailed it in, it would take 3 or 4 days for them to get it. Then it takes 3 or 4 days for them to put it together. Then it takes another to send it to you. And God forbid that one of the cassettes would foul up. And then, so you're on cassette 11 of 15, and you have to wait for the replacement cassette to come through the mail. Now it's with 3 clicks on a phone, you can pretty much download something right there and start listening that minute. Get a sample of it, and ooh, that sounds interesting, or ooh, that's not my cup of tea. It's been great in that regard, in terms of, I think, on the customer side, just to be able to satisfy people's wants very rapidly, as opposed to having to waiting all the time. So the technology has changed so much in the 30 years that we've been working in the field. We were lucky, I think, in a sense that we got started right really as the industry was just starting to blossom. Because there were maybe 6 to 10 companies originally back in the late 80s, early 90s. And now there's hundreds. I think I read somewhere audiobook industry was $500 million of revenue last year, something like that.
So we met doing theater here in this area, in the DC area, and then our paths kept crossing, and eventually we started dating, and we ended up getting married and having 2 kids. And one of the things that was always very funny to me was that we come from very different backgrounds that are remarkably similar. So we both kind of grew up in small villages. I grew up in England, and Michael grew up in Minnesota. And our fathers were in similar fields of finance.
But vastly different.
Both yeah. Kind of in banking. Mm-hmm. And you would never, it's like testament to the variety of human beings and the ways there are to live, that we kind of found each other. And despite the fact that we're from very, very different backgrounds, we have a lot in common.
That's awesome. That is. It's really nice whenever you find people that have that almost like kind of fated to be kind of way that they found each other and came together. through that combined love and enjoyment of something. And it's like, well, every time I turn around, he or she was there. And,
yeah.
well,
or, like
kind of
you
thing.
kind of choose the thing that will torture you in exactly the way you want to be tortured. The first time our parents met each other was at a dinner at our house. We had bought a house together in DC, and we were living together in that house. And our parents had never met. They'd come into town for the wedding, and the first time they were supposed to meet was at a dinner that we were giving them at our house. And the night before that dinner, I decided that the orangey peachy paint color of the dining room just wouldn't do, and we had to repaint it. And I think I gave up about 2:00 in the morning, and Michael stayed up until about 4 or 5, finishing painting the dining room walls on the evening before our parents were supposed to meet there for the very first time. And that kind of describes our entire life together.
Yeah, it was a three color and a glaze treatment, and getting it to be the right way. Yeah, on a ladder.
Right.
2:00 in the morning.
In the middle of the night.
No audiobook to listen to.
Hey, if that's not love, I don't know what is.
Yeah.
So something
go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, something I was trying to find more on, and the internet is not proving to be cooperative for me, and I've looked several times, was some of the awards that you two have received. And all I've been able to find thus far is where, Michael, you've been awarded the Audiophile Earphones Award and the Torgy Award, as well as some very, very nice praise from the Library Journal, saying that you read clearly and intensely, which I can definitely agree with. And then, Kate, all the ones I found on you are not from audiobooks. It's from your work in the theater, where you received the Washington Theater Lobby Award and the Helen Hayes Award for your role as Lemon in Aunt Dan and Lemon. I'm sure there's more out there that we're not aware of.
So we've both received Audie Awards, which is the Audie Award gala thing. They hand out these awards, and I've won a couple for other books that I've done individually, and then we got one. What was the one that we got? It was the Bridge 4 one.
Yeah, it was not Oathbringer, but Words of Radiance.
Words of Radiance, that's right.
Yeah.
And we got a couple of stabbies. We had
Stabby Awards.
2 daggers downstairs.
And then I was been nominated for a Vocal Artists Award, and the issue with awards is always, it's apples and oranges. It's kiwis and pineapples, and this year kiwi is in, and you did a pineapple. And there's really no way to rate it. It's an honor to be nominated. It's, when you see awards, they're a celebration of the industry, which is great, and publicizing it for everybody. I think both of us feel the most important thing is, have you told the story? Mm-hmm. That comes partly from our training at the Library of Congress, where that's the first rule is tell the story. I can relate there was a wonderful narrator who worked for years at the Library of Congress. His name was Ray Hagan, and he was doing Isaac Bashevis Singer's translations, which are set in Poland, tons of Polish names. So he was constantly calling the author to get the pronunciations. And finally, the author said, and this is a Pulitzer Prize, which is a Pulitzer Nobel Prize winning author. And he's like, it doesn't really matter how you say the name. Just tell the story. That's the most important thing you can do. And so that's the thing we try to focus on.
I think that would lead us into an appropriate. We're not going to do very many questions relating to this, but there has been some back and forth among the fans themselves about how to pronounce different things in the Wheel of Time, names of people, names of places, and a lot of people refer to your work as to how is the proper way to say things. And I know that you have said other things before on Twitter or maybe in other interviews, but what is your take on, is your pronunciation of somebody's name the way it is, or is that just your interpretation of it?
Well, there were some pronunciations in a glossary in the back of the book. Mm-hmm. When we started with the first one, this is in the age before there was anything like a cell phone, before there was anything like free long distance. There was no internet. There was no emailing. And I started reading the book, and I got the lion's share, I think, of the 1,000 pages. I think I had 940. So I was wondering why Kate was being brought in on this. And then that changed, obviously, over the years. But about, page 60, I started to run into any number of words, terms, names that were not listed in the glossary. So we called up Robert Jordan, because the idea of having to wait to get a pronunciation from him in that age would have been impossible. It would have made recording the book, it would take a year at that rate, given all the names that are not in the glossary. And we talked about potentially, how do you want us to proceed on this? Do you have, a strong feeling about any of this? And he said, basically, he said, you can kind of see the rule of thumb that I use in the glossary. And then we suggested, we'll just kind of keep using that same phonetics. And if there's anything ultimately that you want changed, once you hear it, we can go back and change it or whatever. But we never heard another word from him. So essentially he gave us carte blanche to pronounce the names the way we saw fit. And we tried to be consistent. Little did we know that we would have an encyclopedia worth of characters, because I think when we first started the series, there was only 5 books at that point. So that, and then there's always a couple times some names changed in the glossary, which was interesting. And then there's a couple of times where we would miss a name and then catch it. That word actually is in the glossary, but it's buried in some other entry. So then sometimes in succeeding volumes, you'll hear that same character's name correctly, quote unquote, pronounced.
Or pronounced differently.
And we apologize for that. Some of that is, especially in the later ones where when we first started this, we had the paperback versions of the books to work from, and originally in the audiobook world, it used to be that the audiobook would come out anywhere from 3 to 6 months after the book was published. So you were working from the finished copy as opposed to a galley. Now, to take advantage of all of the advertising and the hype about a book, they try to release the audio at the same time as the print version, which means that you have to work from a galley where there can be all manner of mistakes that will be corrected by an editor or not. And oftentimes we're in conference with the editors because we're catching mistakes that have made it through, and trying to fix them or figure out how do you want this said, because it doesn't have then and that are both words on spell check, but they have vastly different meanings and applications. So anyway, the later ones, we were working from galleys, and so sometimes things would slip by. we tried to keep communicating with each other in terms of this, but sometimes you run into a character 2 books later, and it might have been that Kate had that character in her stuff, but it hadn't crossed over to my stuff. And so I tend not to remember things that I don't really have to say. And then all of a sudden in book 10, I encounter that character, and then it's like, oh, well, who is this? Or from my own point of view, it's like that was 3 books ago. That might have been 6 years ago. So it's a challenge,
right?
And we are dreadfully sorry. We know that this is something that really, really bothers people.
Yeah.
But we would ask the fans to realize that these books were recorded over a span of 20 years.
Mm-hmm. I was just going to say that part of your recording process, I assume, is that you record separately and send everything in, and it all gets put back together, or at least that's the way it happens now. And I think some people,
not originally.
Some people assume
originally.
Let him finish.
Let
him finish.
I think that some people assume that it's like, because it sounds as you're listening to it like 2 people are sitting there taking turns reading you a book, and I'm guessing that that's the way it was originally, or something similar.
With the very first few books, before we had computers, when we were laying down tracks on actual tape, we had to take turns in the booth. So one of us would be sitting outside the booth waiting for the other one to finish their section and then pop in and continue recording. It was insane. We were so happy when we finally got computerized and could record it separately and send in each of our own stuff.
Yeah, especially those sections where it's 2 pages here, 1 page there, 3 pages there, 6 pages here. And you'd be like, okay, but you have to wait that whole time where the other person is trying to knock out their section.
Yeah.
Andrew, you've been pretty quiet.
I mean, I'm here. It's so easy to fall into the habit of just listening to Kate and Michael talk.
And we got a phone book. Why we can just sit and read the phone book for you?
I'll second that.
Yeah.
I'll second that.
But yeah, I mean, it's just really, really interesting to hear about how you guys started, recording audio. I was about to say audiobooks, but yeah, audiobooks. I think they were still called that. Anyway, every time I think audiobook, for some reason I like associate it with Audible. Mm-hmm. But how far that industry has come, and how long you guys have been doing it, and it's very obvious in how you talk about it that you enjoy it, that you love doing it, that it does help further your love for the theater. I can't say anything more beyond it. It's just really interesting to sit and listen to, and I get to kind of be a little bit of a fangirl about it, that I get to listen to it live. So
yeah, I mean, I think that's the thing, that you have a question down here about, find a job you love and you'll never have to work a day in your life. And that is absolutely true for us. And we feel so grateful that what we do to put bread on the table is something that feeds our souls and not just our bellies. And that's why now that it is easier for people to sort of reach out to us and contact us, thanks to Twitter, and we have a fan page on Facebook as well, and people send us messages. It is so rewarding to hear from people who say things like, "You saved my life," and they mean it. They were in a really horrible, dark place, and listening to the books carried them through. Or from kids who were dyslexic, undiagnosed dyslexic, and couldn't read. And it was listening to audiobooks that ignited their love of reading, because it got past the frustration caused by the dyslexia. It's been amazing to hear people's stories.
That was when we had finished A Memory of Light. I think it was the third post on on Audible was from someone who said that this series and listening to this series just transformed his life because he did suffer from dyslexia. And somehow he was, basically so frustrated at school and with his life. And he ended up starting to listen to The Wheel of Time. And he got caught up, as many people do, in the story. And as time went on, he was like, okay, I'm going to use this to help me to learn to read. And he did. And he said, that got me through high school. And then I'm going to, continue to work at being able to read and write and overcoming this dyslexia that got him into college and that got him his career. And that's a story that, to me, it's like, that's why you do it. That's one of the reasons why it's so rewarding.
Yeah, that must be very encouraging, to just remind you that you're not just sitting alone in a basement studio somewhere reading a book. It is going out and impacting other people's lives.
Yeah. Well, I mean, books are like that to begin with. The fact that it's an audiobook. We all think everybody who reads, whether you read in the audio version or in a print version, that books can change your life because that's that conversation with that person who somehow opens up the world to you.
Yeah, it's immensely incredible to hear that story and know that there's for as many people as this is reached out and touched, there's probably dozens more of stories that are just like that or very similar. Easily dozens upon dozens. And that's, I don't think as a person, as a human being, you could ask for more than to be of such help to your fellow human beings, in whatever way it is. For you guys, it's, through the audiobooks, and maybe you do some other like kind of charitable type work. Well, obviously you do, but I can't imagine just like the smiles on your faces whenever you read something like that.
Oh, we cry.
Yeah.
We like, did you see that? Did you see that? Look, read this. I mean, it's so moving because, we're all like specks of dust on a big old whirling rock, right? And we're all searching for meaning and purpose. And we'll want to feel ultimately like we're making some kind of a contribution. And when someone gives you this gift of validating your existence and saying, thank you, you made a difference to me, you can't put a price on that.
Yeah, I definitely have to agree. I mean, it is by true definition absolutely priceless.
Mm-hmm.
But I think Aaron had some more questions.
Yeah. In the midst of this discussion about the potential impact of what you guys do and how it can impact people's lives, there's been an online debate or something that, Kate, you may have triggered. You sent a tweet maybe a week ago. It said, if I'm just going to read it here, it says, every time you speed up the audio, a narrator angel falls to the ground in a fireball of denied artistic choice. Fight me. As someone who has a sensitive ear, and I also desire to hear recordings, whether they be audiobooks or music, the way that the artist intended it to be, I identify with that feeling that I think you're having. I know there's other people who do not identify with that. They choose to speed up their audiobooks 2 times, 3 times, whatever. They just want to get through it as fast as possible. I feel like this ruins or at least diminishes the experience of listening to an audiobook or reading an audiobook, however you want to say it. Can you maybe tell us a little bit more about what was going on when you said that, or what you were thinking, or maybe we can win some people over to our side. That's what I'm going for here.
The slow team.
Yes.
So I'm fascinated by this because I know that when I'm in the booth, I'm interacting with the story, and I'm also interacting with the imaginary people I'm telling the story to, the listener. And so everything I do is a deliberate choice. So if I pause for a quarter of a breath or a half a breath or a full breath, that's a choice. None of it is random. Even if I'm not, sort of my brain isn't stopping to make a particular choice because it's so instinctive, it's still a choice. And I would never dream of watching a movie in sped up form or listening to music in sped up form. So I'm really intrigued by, that's why I posted that tweet. I wanted to hear from people who do speed up to understand why. And a lot of it has to do with brain function. So there are a lot of people who simply cannot stand to listen to a book in real time. And I'm a little bit like that, so I can understand and relate to that, because I'm a very impatient listener. I would much rather read a text or an email than have to listen to someone leaving me a voicemail message. It's an irrational response. I feel like they are trapping me. They are restricting me. They are forcing me to stop my life. And they are allowed to take all the time they want to give me their message. Of course, that's not really what's going on, but that's how I instinctively respond to the experience of listening to someone's voicemail. Mm-hmm. So some of the people who responded on Twitter had that similar sort of feelings, in that it upsets them to listen in real time. It is a deeply unpleasant, upsetting experience. They have to speed it up. And then Michael and I were talking about it, and we were also wondering whether this is a division between the people who focus on the plot points and the people who focus on the atmospherics. So if you focus on the atmospherics, you want to experience the silences, because that's part of the atmospheric experience. If all you are interested in is the plot points, you want to get to the next action.
You mentioned something, and this is one of the things that is one of the, what I would call the burden of narration. What is the artist's intention? What is the author's intention? And what we kind of use a music metaphor. By that I mean, if you pick up a piece of sheet music, it's very much like a book, in that it's a two-dimensional representation of ideas that another artist is going to interpret in some way. So this artist, if it's this is the melody, and this artist is going to say, do it with a 3-piece combo as opposed to a full symphony. Or this person is going to do a cello, or this person is going to treat it at this tempo. And another artist might say, well, I think the tempo should be sped up or slowed down. So right away, there's a whole bunch of different adjustments that have to happen because of the fact that this is a collaborative medium between the artist who's doing the interpretation of the two-dimensional idea, so to speak. The other thing is the way, and this to a certain degree speaks to what Jennifer Kate was talking about. in that when you read, your eye looks at certain ideas, and if it's just had that idea, says it might be the let's say the income statement for 2019 as regards to medical costs, and when you see that the income statement for the medical for 2018 with regard to medical costs, in the next sentence, your eye looks at that and says, "Oh, that's B. That's a real quick. I've got that idea." As a narrator, your mouth has to say all of those syllables. So it can be frustrating if you're listening, because when you are reading using just your sight, your mind has already looked at that whole phrase, that whole group of 25 syllables, and said, "Oh, I got that. I'm on the next thing." Meanwhile, the tongue is still catching up, and so I understand to a certain degree why people may want to listen to it faster, and that. So it's understandable on the one hand. On the other hand, there are times, for instance, if you were listening to Cormac McCarthy's The Road, you don't want to be listening to that faster than whoever is doing it. I happened to do that book for the Talking Books program. I know that there's a different narrator who did the commercial version of it, but that is, again, it's partly atmospherics, but atmospherics are so important to how that book is related. And you can't listen to it fast and understand some of the pain that's happening there, which it's like looking at an ellipse, as in the sense of a pause, a thought happening. And to just barrel through that as if it's a period or it's a comma or it's not even there is to not be honoring the intention of the author. And sometimes you're going to miss the point if you do that.
You see a lot in play scripts for the theater. The playwright will utilize the punctuation and the layout on the page to try and indicate the uses of silence. So you might have a character might have a speech, and instead of a run-on sentence after sentence in a paragraph form, each sentence will drop down, or there'll be a space between the sentences, or the sentence will be broken up by phrase and drop down, or it'll say beat in parentheses, or it'll say pause in parentheses, or it will say interminably long pause. And that is the creator of the story is trying to use silence as a way of communicating instead of using a word or a phrase. So I know that I'm sensitive to that. I'm sensitive to punctuation and layout on the page. And I tend to honor it because I feel like my job is really to disappear and to serve the author so that you get, listening wise, you get as close of an experience to seeing it on the page as I can manage. But, people have their preferences. And their brains function in different ways. And certainly when we started out, you didn't have necessarily as many options for speeding up or slowing down, which now you do. And so it's kind of fascinating to me how people have preferences and they choose to listen in the way that works best for them. And that's fantastic. Everybody has choices. I was being a little provocative when I said, fight me. But I do care about...
Right.
making sure that people get the full experience that I'm trying to deliver.
And there are just those, I think humor especially depends on timing. And so to speed things up sometimes can be destructive to that. One of the things to me, I think that's important is let a laugh line breathe, because if you are not letting it breathe, you're not cueing the fact that that was a funny line.
No, you're not allowing someone to react to what you've said.
Right, exactly, people need those cues or want those cues. In some cases, because they're not aware that that was. If I think about that, that's funny. They may be ahead of the game and they may know that already, but sometimes not. And also just so they can laugh and then move on to that next line.
I also wonder to what extent it's just a natural development in our kind of rapaciously consumer culture. This not slowing down to savor something, but gobble it. Or a function of how busy people are, or the pace at which people move and live.
Yeah,
I don't know. It's very mysterious. I loved reading.
Yeah, see, that's one thing for me that I definitely understand, because for me, I'm a very fast reader. There was one of the books in the Wheel of Time that I literally picked up on a Friday when I got down to my grandmother's, and like 5 hours before we left the following Sunday, I was already done. And I remember being angry at myself for having finished the books that I loved so fast.
Did you interact with anybody the entire weekend?
I didn't talk to anybody. Not a single thing. I ate while
he didn't eat food.
I drank while eating.
He didn't sleep.
I mean, I drank while reading. And I'm pretty sure if I could have, I would have slept somehow while reading. But by now being a little over halfway through my first reread of the series and doing the podcast, I catch myself in these kind of like anxiety-induced moments of, I haven't been able to read. I need to read. I need to get through this reread so I remember everything and can connect it. And when I get in those places where I'm like, I haven't read in like 3 days, I go and, okay, I'm on, Knife of Dreams, and I'll get the audiobook. And it's only 7 minutes from where I live to where I work, but that's 7 minutes of me getting to listen to the audiobook, feeling like I'm progressing in my reread of the series. And then I get to work and open up to wherever, the audiobook left off, and I read. And then, thankfully audible. Geez. English is hard. No breaking down by chapters. So I always try to stop at the end of the chapter. So on the way home, I can pick up the audiobook on the way back. And for me, that was a new experience, listening to you guys narrate the story. And it really gave me a respect for the amount of agency that you have in interpreting the cadence of the passages that you're reading. And it gave me a new spin being a fast reader and just kind of reading through the books. I mean, absorbing them, but reading through quickly. It let me kind of sit back and just listen and enjoy it. I wouldn't say it's any more or less enjoyment, but it's a different form of enjoyment for me for the series. And it's nice and refreshing in its own way to take that kind of slow, relaxed back, kind of, just listen to it. And it just made me look at several scenes for the 3 or 4 audiobooks that I've been able to use thus far. Eventually I'll collect them all like Pokemon, but and it's it's
a really different experience, isn't it?
It really is. And I love it. And going, I guess for me, that's where I can kind of understand about people speeding up audiobooks and listen to them. And I get, every person has their own flavor, their own enjoyment, their own mentality. But I couldn't imagine speeding them up because of what about it makes me enjoy it more so than just listening to the story.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a new series that we're working on. It's actually a guy from Australia. His name is Shad, and the book is Everfall. And it's about 600 pages. Michael has the bulk of it. I have a little bit. But I had to read the whole book to make sure that I knew the story to prepare for my sections. And I've been knitting. I've taken up knitting because I want to make a patchwork blanket. And I also find that it helps me to be more patient when I'm listening if I'm doing something with my hands, which was a recent revelation. So that's interesting. And I had Shad's book on my iPad, and I was knitting. And so whenever I read to the bottom of the screen, I would reach out and scroll up and keep knitting. But it made me read much more slowly than I normally do. And what I found was I was much more engaged with the story, and it kept my interest far more than my usual kind of speed read scrolling through a story. And so that was a really good thing for me to discover.
So piggying back off of talking about piggybacking. I'm gonna stick with piggying back. I am not hitting all strikes on. Well, I am striking out, I guess, if you think baseball. I was thinking bowling for some reason on English right now. So to continue on that thought of reading for you guys. That's kind of like you mentioned the question earlier about finding a job that you love, and kind of the tail end of that thought process, that question that Aaron had was doing the work that you do for recording these audiobooks. Has it put any kind of damper on your personal enjoyments for reading, or has it enhanced it, or how has that affected what you like to do in terms of reading?
Not an iota.
Yeah.
I mean, we go on vacation, and the first thing we'll do is we'll go to the beach and each have a book. Now, it may influence the type of book that we're reading, just because we get exposed to, we do a lot of fantasy, so I don't know that we would necessarily choose that genre, although if I wasn't doing that, I probably would. But we both continue to read Kate voraciously. Myself, not quite as much, because I'm a slow reader, so it takes me a long time to get through things. But on my bookshelf right now, I'm doing Doris Kearns Goodwin's Leadership in Turbulent Times, and there are any number of books that we're at the point now. For instance, at the Library of Congress Talking Books program, if I encounter a book that isn't in the system yet, I can just ask them, can we include this? And in most cases, they can. So there have been a number of books that I've just come to the library and said, this is a really good book. We really should do it. And I've been able to do things that way, so that you get to combine both pleasure and work at the same time. But
yeah, it hasn't diminished our enjoyment of reading for personal pleasure at all.
Yeah.
And I mean, our basement has bookcases which are stuffed.
Yeah.
There are books in pretty much every room of the house. They sort of expand like some blob.
Yeah, we do a purge, and then about 3 months later, it's like
very rare.
We have to do another.
So you guys do books like some people do guns. Like there's a gun in every room of the house. For you guys, it's a book.
What a terrible.
Like if we have a,
I don't know that
if we have
killed anyone.
If we have a, if you have a home invader, you're gonna beat them with 1,000 pages of printed knowledge.
Yeah, or we just make him sit down and read the worst ones.
Yeah.
Oh, but, I remember for me, like in third grade, the worst one was The Secret Garden.
I recorded that.
I should have listened to it because I hated reading it. But if I listened to it, I'd probably enjoy it a lot more.
What did you hate about reading it?
It just wasn't my kind of story, I guess. Because in third grade, I had it's called like advanced academic placement classes. I guess it's some way to try to make kids think they're smart, because I'm by no means that smart. It sounds fancier than it is. But going through there, in third grade for me, 2001, I was just now starting to get to where I liked to read, where I enjoyed reading. And for me, it was more I had to focus on things I enjoyed to read, because at the same time, well, right after we finished The Secret Garden, which was required by curriculum, the teacher handed us a book called Basher 5-2, the autobiography of retired Captain Scott O'Grady. And that I loved. I couldn't put it down. Like, we had 3 months to read the book, and I was done in a week.
Yeah.
So, like, all of my assignments were done, and I would still, to this day, read that book over again. But at least at the time, that The Secret Garden wasn't my, cup of tea, I guess. And maybe if I went back and read it now, I would enjoy it more so. I have patchy memories of the book. All I remember right now is like a skeleton key. But,
well, sometimes when you're an adolescent boy, you reject things based solely on preconception, like, oh, that's a girly thing. I'm just leaving it alone.
And there's also, the archaic language can be an impenetrable thicket if you're not used to, I grew up without a television. So all I had was books. And I happened to love classics. So I would gobble up Thomas Hardy and Jane Austen. They were like comic books to me. I was so familiar with that time period of language in written form that it was like an old friend. But if you're used to reading contemporary language and then you go read a book like The Secret Garden, it's like, what is this? Why are you obscuring the story with this ridiculous language? It's just a different way of expressing.
Did you, when you read it, and this is partly in the audio world, because did you hear the Yorkshire accent?
I did not.
That's one of the things, I think, that as a narrator, that's one of the things. It's kind of, again, to use our music metaphor, so to speak. A musician can look at a page and hear the piccolo part and hear the bass strings part and hear all those things clearly, whereas the novice musician might only just hear the notes, but not the particular instrument that's playing them. And that becomes our job, in a way, to figure out what is the orchestration of that melody and how does that influence the story.
So when you go back and you pick up that book again and you read it again,
right,
just preface it by thinking to yourself, okay, this is a story about the death of the oppressive British Empire, about nasty, dead old white men controlling everything. And this is about a new world, a new life, new energy. When they go in the garden and they check the plants to see if they're living or dead, they use the word wick. Wick means if you break off a branch, it's got green, it's alive. And there's a scene where I've got goosebumps right now, and it's been 25 years since I recorded that book. There's a scene where they go around the garden and they're checking the plants and they're like, it's wick, it's wick. And it's so exciting because what they thought was dead is alive. So that's what I love about that book.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to reread it, because I kind of get where you're coming from. Because in school, being forced to read things like Macbeth, or Hamlet rather, the first time or two, I didn't really enjoy it. But as I read it more, and I don't know who's at my door, but we're going to ignore that. But as I continue to read it over and over and over again and understand it more, I was able to appreciate just how incredibly fantastic and at times absolutely hilarious Hamlet is.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. It does, what you bring to the encounter is hugely important.
I think I want to ask maybe one last question, and then we can maybe people, if you have final thoughts, and we'll wrap it up. But I think one of the most noticeable things when I listen to both of you, either when you're reading books together or the books that I've listened to both of yours separately, I'm struck by the amazing variety and accuracy of the accents that you do for all the different characters that are in these books. And some of these books have a lot of characters in them, especially The Wheel of Time. I don't know who it is that has done the narration for Game of Thrones, but bless them, there's a lot of characters there too. And I don't know how it is that you, both of you, are able to keep straight the kind of voice that you've brought to life for each of those distinct and separate characters. I know I couldn't do it.
Okay. Because your voice is connected to your body, and Robert Jordan and Brandon do a great job in most cases of describing the person in terms of how they look, where they're holding their tension, what kind of shape are they in. When you first begin with the voice for that character, you're changing, as a narrator, you're changing yourself physically to put that tension into whatever place that may be. It might be that your face is all, held together and you can't get the words out because it just really hurts a whole lot, or you might be just really slow or whatever. But you've found a physical representation for that, and it becomes part of your body. So when you encounter that same character again, you've kind of gone through this move, this body, so to speak. And it's really, once you've done that for a couple of pages, for a scene or something, all of a sudden those things come back to you. And then it's just a question of the other part in terms of language. I think Kate is fluent in French, some Italian, Spanish, German. I had some Latin and German, and then just listening. Like one of the benefits of being in the theater, for instance, was when I was playing an Israeli character, and they brought in a vocal coach, and so I got to learn all about Israeli vocal patterns and vowel substitutions. So once you begin to do that, it gets a lot easier to remember what they are. And also the plate of choices is kind of like going to your spice rack and going, well, let's see, let's put a little bit of this and a touch of that, and a dollop of this, and that'll make this character who he is. Mm-hmm. Again, it's all based on a textual reference. I also think, having grown up in the country, where everything isn't polished, where you're seeing people all the time, and if you just kind of watch people a little bit, you begin to listen to people, you come up with all kinds of things, and then you start to see them in descriptions of characters, and it becomes a whole lot of fun. In a way, it's like in the orchestration world, so to speak, it's like, I'm going to do this with violins and trumpets, and this one I'm going to do with a piccolo and an English horn, and that's how I'm going to make all of that kind of come together.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I was like,
it's kind of. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Kate.
No, go ahead.
Oh, so I was going to say it's kind of like, for me, like your situation determines. I'm hoping I'm using this word correctly. Your dialect or your.
Yep.
For me, it's just basically accent. Because if I'm just hanging around with a bunch of friends and we're doing whatever, I can let the real country come out and I can talk a bit like this and no one makes fun of me.
Right.
That's right.
But if I'm doing the podcast, I talk like this. If I'm making a presentation at work, it's kind of tailored a little bit to your audience, but that's part of the situation that you're having to look about. Right. And that's kind of what molds how you're going to speak, and, certain verbiage that you're going to use or avoid, or certain words you may take a little bit longer to pronounce than you would otherwise.
Right. And that's just basic character study. So you contain within you several different people who behave differently and speak differently at different times. And then it's just a question of practicing like an athlete, training, so that you keep expanding your repertoire, so that you contain millions of people. And you can be anything that's described on a page, even if it's a silver worm from outer space.
Loyal. Loyal was one of the. I remember when I first encountered him in the pre-read, and I thought, "Oh my God, this is a 3-page monologue he has." So the first time you meet him, he speaks almost nonstop for 3 pages, and then the description of his voice and what he is and who he was. And I just remember I had done the pre-read, and I sat on that. I let it kind of just filter around in my mind for, I don't know, it was probably a week or so before I got to that section. So you just kind of let it rumble around, and then you open your mouth and trust that your instinct is going to be right. And you almost know almost immediately, oh, that's a good choice. That fits, that works. Or nope, go back, start again.
Yeah.
And in that regard, you feel like you're channeling.
Yeah.
You're channeling the author, but the author is also just channeling something, and you're hooked into that channel. Because there are times when you'll have a section of dialogue. It can be 2 voices, it can be 5, it can be 10. If you're in the zone, so to speak, you are hitting them all, and you know them because you're seeing them in your mind's eye as you're saying each line. And they are so vividly present to you with regard to that. I mean, that speaking their lines is as easy as opening your mouth.
Yeah, I can imagine there's several scenes from The Wheel of Time that had to be an incredible amount of fun to record. Like Moraine's monologue on Manetheren in the first book. I'm sure... I don't know how anyone doesn't enjoy any facet about Demise Wells and scenes like that from the series. And to be the voice that everyone hears, and to be able to be the one to bring that cadence that, as the Library Journal has called it for you, Michael, that intensity to the ears of what better be millions and soon to be billions, if not already, of people. I can't imagine how incredible that feels to just know that your voice has reached so many people.
It's like one of the craziest things about when we started our Facebook fan page was, as people started liking the page, we could sort of see who they were, and realizing that there were people from all over the world. Yeah. And I was like, wait, we've got a Swami from India. What's he doing here? Yeah. And look, there's someone from Denmark. Yeah. Look at that. And it was incredible. It was like, the language wasn't a problem. They were all listening to it in English. And it was something about the story that has just galvanized so many people into following. I mean, who sticks with a series for 15 volumes? When the books are that big, you better love it, right? So kudos to Robert Jordan.
And Brandon.
And Brandon for finishing it off,
Yeah. I mean, that's something, seeing the people from different areas of the world, that's something that, luckily and very fortunately and surprisingly for Aaron, and I think Aaron would agree, that we kind of get a sense of. Because we can go back and look at the geographic analytics of who downloads the podcast, and to just see so many different areas of the map lit up. I remember looking at it the first time, and I'm like, who in Russia downloaded the podcast?
or Sweden.
And there's always that there's always that possibility that it could be somebody using like a VPN.
Yeah.
But when you start seeing, higher numbers from like Sweden and the UK and Australia, it's humbling, because you're just like, why?
Yeah.
But awesome.
And especially when you're used to your sphere of influence being the things that you can see and touch and smell. You're used to those things being the things that you impact and people that you interact with.
Mm-hmm.
And doing something like this, it opens you up, even though, not as many people have heard our voices as yours. We're like maybe 5,000 downloads. We're just getting started.
As it should be.
But
As it should be. More people should hear Kate and Michael.
Absolutely. My point is, it's opened my sense of awareness to the fact that there are people all over the world who are interacting with each other, and it's not just what I can see out of my window.
Yes.
Yeah.
There was a guy, what country was he from? Was it Norway or Sweden? Norway?
Norway.
There was a guy from Norway who got in touch with us, and he wanted us to record a marriage proposal for his girlfriend. And I missed the message. I'm the one that generally checks the messages and tries to keep up with them. I missed the message. I didn't see it until it was, a couple of months later. And I wrote to him and I said, I'm so sorry I missed this message. Is there anything that we can do? And he wrote back and he said, well, would you be willing to record a poem that I would write for us to read at our wedding, to listen to at our wedding? And I said, no, that sounds great. So he wrote this poem that's like about a page long, and he sent it to us, and we recorded it, sent it back. And so somewhere in some church in Norway, there are our voices in the middle of a wedding ceremony. That blew my mind. Mm-hmm. That's like one of the unthought of experiences that when we signed up to record, like, who would have thought that would be one of the outcomes? It's delightful.
Yeah, I really hope no one ever asked me to narrate anything for their wedding, because it's not going to be good.
It would be lovely, especially if you did it in your friend's only voice.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Just go all deep Southern NASCAR
there you go.
I think that's a nice positive note. I think it's maybe time to start winding down. Is there anything that the two of you have wanted to say before we end this, or have you said all I know you have many more words left in you, and we hope to listen to you for many more years to come. But for this hour of podcast time, is there anything else that you would like to say?
Congratulations to the two of you for launching your podcast. I think that's fantastic. I hope a lot of people listen to it. We have been just amazed at the enthusiasm that people have for this series and sort of spinning off into other series. Think it's absolutely wonderful that people come together because of a story. So we really appreciate what you guys do as well.
Yeah, no,
you honor us far too much.
Never enough.
No.
Oh, you're going to make me blush. Stop it.
Yeah, I can see it in the sine wave.
Yeah.
I need a tissue. Right? Andrew, is there anything else that you had?
I don't know. I think before I spoke, Michael was about to say something.
We should do a little shout out for VJs who wanted to find out about projects that are coming up for us.
Projects that we're working on is, as Kate mentioned, we're working on the Chronicles of Everfall, and I'll be coming out with the second of the Mythborn as opposed to the Mistborn.
Two different things, people.
Not derivative in any way, but the title being very germane to the writing.
Which we're excited about because we actually get a royalty share from the Mythborn project. Wheel of Time, we got paid a flat fee for, so it doesn't matter how many copies are sold. We don't see any income from sales of the Wheel of Time books, and we're sort of interested in starting more projects that give us royalty shares. I did a bunch of romances on ACX, and it's amazing. People buy them, and there's a little bit of money every month. And I'm like, oh, that's really nice.
No one can blame you for that. I mean, it's something you love, but it's a business, it's a job as well. And you both do absolutely amazing work, and you more than deserve to be compensated accordingly.
You too.
So if anybody has any problems with Michael and Kate wanting to get paid for what they do,
they're gonna have to come through me.
Yeah. You're gonna have to fight the Black Tower and the White Tower and all of the Wheel of Time fandom.
Yeah.
So come at me, bro.
And it's exciting to see that this TV series is starting up.
Yeah, that'd be very interesting to see how they handle that.
They seem to be being very thoughtful and thorough, and they've got like expert consultants, right?
Yes, they do. They hired one person to be a consultant who doesn't have anything really to do with television. It's just that I think she has some experience, but she's read the books, the entire series, like 27 times or something. She's their like details consultant or something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's very smart of them to do that.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to see how everyone knows, or the fandom refers to the first world guide to the Wheel of Time as the Big White Book of Bad Art.
Yes.
And most recently, there's a guy that's doing a primitive style map of the Wheel of Time series, and to still see like repercussions that are still being ironed out over that. There was the flag, I believe, of Era Demon, that everywhere you see it is just, white and blue stripes with a hand, holding a sword point up. And then you look in the most recent companion and then how it's described in the series, and you're like, that's 100% wrong. And it's such a, when you look at the series as a whole, it's such a small detail that it's so easy to overlook if you don't have someone that's like a detail specialist. They can sit there and be like,
you've got it back.
Yeah, that's wrong. Which, luckily and I feel honored to have brought it to his attention, but I was able to tell the guy that's working on the map, I'm like, that's wrong. Which kind of sucked because that was like his third time redoing it. Then he had to redo it again because it was completely wrong.
Yeah, but there's, there's a reason. I mean, that type of description, it's like, well, it's there.
And he's working on a commission piece that somebody has paid him hundreds of dollars to do. That
I think it's more like thousands.
Yeah, probably thousands. It's a piece of rawhide, hand burning a map into with a wood burner and creating texture and painting it as though it were a satellite image of the map, and then overlaying cities, and it's very detailed and very realistic.
Like he is literally taking natural pigments, mixing them with water and clear Elmer's glue, and painting everything with a bone tool.
Wow!
Like
he's not using blood.
He might. He just doesn't tell anybody. I think that's about all the time we have. You can reach Kate and Michael where on Twitter and Facebook and all of these places if you want to. Could you tell us what those are, please?
So it's Kramer _Redding VO, I believe.
Yeah.
That's the Twitter handle for our joint Twitter account. And then you can find our individual accounts from there.
Okay. It's all interconnected.
And the Facebook page is Michael Kramer
and Kate Redding on Facebook.
Well, that's very simple. We're used to people being like, well, this is my Facebook, and 30 different ways to contact them. I think simple may be better, and it cuts through all the noise. Well, everybody who's listening to this knows how to get a hold of us, so I'm not going to bother you with our contact details.
Well, we can do one.
Okay.
That gives all of them.
If you would like to find anything about us, you can check out our hosting site, which is the Andrew,
Black
you're better
Tower
at saying
Pod.
it.
Yeah, it's blacktowerpod.podbean.com. And from there, you find links to all of our other social media and contact.
I always forget which part of it is in front and which part's behind. Thank you for being so...
We're definitely professionals here.
Yeah, so professional.
Delightfully professional.
Oh, thank you.
There's that blush again.
It just, again, we want to thank you for agreeing to come on and speak with us and share some of your time. I know that for two people who record books for a living, your time is your money and it's precious to you. So it means a lot to us that you would come and talk to. I mean, sometimes we don't even think about who we are. We're just two fans, It's meant a lot to us today.
You're so very welcome. How could we resist the Black Tower?
Yeah.
Well, the Black Tower always protects. Always
tower.
For those of us who are here at the Black Tower, I'd like to say goodbye. And my name is Aaron.
My name is Andrew. And we have had
Michael Kramer
and Kate Redding.
Yes.